Welcome back, and in this segment we will be talking about a new innovation which was introduced to the Egyptian Museum of Antiquities, where 171 participants enjoyed a hologram of King Tutankhamun, greeting them to his exhibition, where once they wore special HoloLens and a headset, they managed to totally transform the exhibit hall into a temple of the pharaoh, where Tutankhamun led them through his various artifacts. It was very interactive, and the designer of it is a PhD designer as well as a researcher at the University of Stratfordshire, and he's here with us. I'm happy to have with me Mr. Ramy Hammady, and he's the designer of this interesting hologram. Welcome with us.
Welcome.
Well, first of all, you are specializing in animation.
Yeah.
Yes. How did it, first of all, how did the idea occur to you?
First of all, I was in the Egyptian Museum, and I realized that there is a specific problem there, that most of the visitors spend like 1 hour in the biggest museum, you know, for Egyptians. And that caused a problem because other museums around the world, people spend days, actually, not hours. So from this point, I started to make some research to figure out what is the problem, and then I figured out that a solution could be done through one of the recent technologies called augmented and mixed realities. So I spent 2 years in my PhD trying to realize the actual problems and the patterns of the visitors in the Egyptian Museum, either the domestic and the internationals. And then I made a kind of observation to see how they react in front of the exhibits, and then I built my own application. The application called Museum Eye. Museum Eye is the third eye that can see the museum with a different perspective. The idea is the system is divided into two types of scenes, or two types of demonstrations. The first demonstration is the storytelling stuff. So once the visitor arrives to the Egyptian Museum in Cairo in a specific room, this room has all of the collections of the King Tutankhamun. And once they arrive, they wear this kind of headset called Microsoft HoloLens, and they open the system I built it in, which is Museum Eye, and then there is a kind of a time machine visuals swallow the visitor, and then everything changes to be something else, which is the temple that the king used to rule the country from. So the visitor can see both, actually, both realities. He can see the actual room with the actual antique and also the virtual room. And then the king himself start trying to welcome him and show him everything around, and show him some stories through some kind of visuals and images and text. And around the visitor he can see lots of soldiers and guards and gods, representation of gods as well. And he has a kind of user interface, so he can do some clicks and navigate as long as he wants. He can see some kind of stories and images as well. This is the first section. Yes. Second section is regarding the guidance of the museum. So I built on 10 pieces on the museum some kind of exploration. So you can go to the antique, but you just spend like seconds in front of it. But I made it instead like 7 minutes. So the visitor, once he arrived, the king arrives again, and then he can see the real antique and a virtual one. And the virtual one, the visitor has the ability to navigate and move it around itself, and he can get so many information. And the king himself is working as a virtual guide, so he can give you some stories about this specific antique and all of the information around.
Now, this is all done through a HoloLens, so it's like a glass with an earpiece so that he can hear the narration.
Yes.
Now, how can he control all these things? Like you're saying that you can go around it, you can ask questions, you can navigate. Is it done via certain buttons on the lens itself, or is there a remote control or a certain application?
Okay, so, well, the device itself is a very technological piece, and it's a cutting edge, actually. So there are several buttons on the device itself, so you can control the light and audio from here. And also, if you have some buttons floating on the air in front of you, so you can do some kind of air click with your hands. You don't have to hold a kind of a gadget or anything. So everything, the usability is so much high, and people, even in my experiment, I have done it in last December. People were very happy because they tried to use it, and they got the usability and user experience what they try in few minutes at the beginning.
But that means that it's quite complicated because it requires animation, it requires 3D, it requires audio recording, and definitely you must have done certain researches, and of course there'll be certain way of narrating and acting when it comes to the presentation. Then you've got, definitely, if you're going to do all these visual things, then there is a wireless connection in a way between whatever you'll be clicking on air and the earpiece or the holoset itself. So that's a lot of work. So tell me more about what happened behind the scene to achieve all that, because that's a lot of things in one piece. And
the application actually comprises of several disciplines at the same time, and this is the hardest part in my PhD, to do all of the rules, to make the characters, to make the storytellings exactly like the tour guides used to say, and even to make sure that the validity and the authenticity of the information comes from original sources like academic books or something like that. And also the animation, I did the whole animation by some kind of motion capture suit, so I made it on my own, and then I made some kind of interactions on my own as well. Yeah, it's so massive work, but I have done it actually. And we can't say it's just like a prototype, small prototype. And if we would like to make it like a real application could be done in one of the museums, we should actually gather a kind of a group comprised of several disciplines people.
Yes. Now, how long did it take you to be able to actually take it from the research and paperwork to a real prototype?
Till now, I spent like 2.5 years. The first year just to figure out what is the problem, but I start practically on the application from 1 year actually. So it took about from 9 months to 12 months actually. All of the process starting from scratching till prototyping, testing the system in the museum.
Now I understand that actually this is the topic of your PhD.
Yeah.
So have you discussed your PhD or not yet?
Not yet. I'm writing now the thesis. I'm writing the outcomes. I'm trying to say that now I could, through this software and this system I have built, to change the time that people spend in front of the antiques from 5 to 7 seconds to reach up to 5 to 7 minutes, which is the problem. You know, I could partially solve the problem because now once the visitor visits the museum in 1 hour, now I can make the visiting time could reach like 2 or 3 days because people would like to have it and try it several times and through a few days. So now I think I have achieved my target I set up on the beginning.
Now, tell me please about your experience studying abroad and acquiring your PhD from the United Kingdom.
It's quite hard because you have to deal with different cultures and you have to cope with the culture very fast. You have to cope with the language and how people react, how to manage time, and you have to, what are the responsibilities on your work and your duties you have to carry on. So it wasn't easy, but I believe most of the Egyptians now, once they arrive, and in few months, they cope with the whole thing, and then they start to, do the impossible things and in a shorter time.
I understand that you'll be trying your prototype elsewhere as well.
Yeah. Once I finished the experiment in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, I went for Manchester Museum to try one of the scenes because people heard about it, and I have to do some kind of publishing works in several aspects. So I would like to see how people react physically when they see this kind of holograms, because this is one of the newest experiences around the world in museums. So I'm in my way to record it in one of the copyright agencies or organizations, because there is no museum trying to obtain this kind of technology and make a kind of a virtual museum. So I did actually a small experiment in Manchester Museum, and I tested 50 participants in one of the battle scenes of the King Tutankhamun. They were very happy actually. I have got positive numbers through this experiment.
Now, are you working on your own or you have a team? Because definitely such a grand project definitely must have a team. So would you talk to us about your work or your project?
Yeah, well, it's one of the, my project is an individual, but I got some assistance as well. I have one of my friends called Marwan. He helped me. He's in Egypt actually, but he's so expert in this kind of stuff. So he gave me some kind of help, and I have got some animation assistance, some kind of, usually this kind of project require a massive people, lots of people, but I got some assistance, but basically most of the work was conducted on my own.
Now, how expensive is the prototype, and how expensive is it to be able to, let's say, if you're going into a museum, definitely you need hundreds of pieces, or at least dozens of it. So to what extent, so would you talk to us about the cost? Is it cost friendly or is it an expensive device?
Okay, well, at the beginning right now, the technology is still growing, okay? And I'm trying to be one of the pioneers in this technology. So usually if one of the technologies prove it successfully and market, in that case, the companies can produce more. I know the device is a little bit expensive, but now we have witnesses lots of devices coming in next few months. It will be cheaper than that. So if we would like to make it scalable in one of the museums in Egypt, I think that will be affordable in next 2 years, for example. And because of this experiment, I would like to say something.
Yes.
One of the biggest conferences in London that discusses this kind of virtual technologies, they invited me to be a speaker to speak about the Egyptian experiment in London, in this one of the biggest stages in Europe, actually. So I'm very proud to say that and speak about Egypt and how people react in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo and this special context in Egypt. So I'm very pleased to say that because I think the participants were so happy, and I wish in my heart actually to scale it in any museum in Cairo, because that will bring so much money for the tourism sector in Egypt.
Now, what about your master's degree? Was it also in animation, and was it also abroad, or was it in Egypt?
Basically, I used to be a teacher assistant or lecturer assistant in Applied Art Helwan University. And most of my background work is graphic design and basic animation, not actually this kind of 3D animation, but basic animation. But when I traveled abroad, I started to dig more in this kind of work in order to build my own system. So it's not that relevant to my basic studies, but it's a little bit drifting to we can say computer science, games, and visual design as well.
Now, at the University of Staffordshire, now, did you find that the way they taught and the educational system and the way you pursue your postgraduate or your doctoral studies were different than when you were at Helwan University?
Okay, they more organized on the way they produce the science. I mean, like, you can have some kind of peer assistance. So if I work with games industry, so I can get some peer assistance from people who work in games, work in programming, so they might help you. So as long as you work on a specific kind of research, you can find some mates, you know, and colleagues can help you and give you some kind of support, which has the same kind of discipline, so you can get more support than working in different disciplines, which is away of the point you choose.
Yes. Now, for the animation itself, before you travel abroad, to what extent is that popular in Egypt? Like, once you return to Egypt, to what extent is animation popular nowadays?
You mean animation agencies or what?
No, being specialized in animation in general in Egypt, apart from the prototype that you're doing, to what extent is that popular, the market of it in Egypt?
I believe animation in Egypt is so much perfect. There are some agencies have so many good animators, but I'm not specialized in animation. Animation was just part of my work. But I'm more specialized with the technology itself and how to handle it and to produce applications. Animation was just part of the process. But I'm working right now in kind of a project as an animator, but this is not my major. However, I would like to work on it. But
so would that need a bit of a computer programming and a bit of software and a little bit of knowledge about electronics in a sense, and computer designing in a sense, or that's totally different?
It's a kind of interdisciplinary because it combines two different kinds of people. People come from a design background and people comes from computer science. So both working together in order to make animation perfectly. Some kind of animation just be done manually by designers only, but others, if they use some kind of equipments like the suits, so the actor can play with the suit, and then the animation comes directly to the character, which is, for example, the King Tutankhamun. So when the actor is animating, the King Tut also animate at the same time. In that case, I think we have, I'm not sure about this, but we have a good animators in Egypt. They produce so much beautiful movies, and I saw that even in next Ramadan we're going to see so much beautiful stuff.
Now I'm quite curious about the uploading itself of the program in the HoloLens. Like, do you work on a separate, bigger computer, you do your project and everything, and then you upload it? Can it be updated and upgraded on its own, or do you need to unload and upload each time you're going to change the theme?
Okay, the device is a kind of a portable computer. So once you just put it on your head, you can see the windows and you can see Cortana, the AI software. So you can speak to Cortana and you can click on some of applications like Skype. It's actually a computer, and it has some audio controllers. You have some kind of brightness controller, and you can go to the internet. You can see a kind of keyboard, and you can click on the keyboard as well, or you can pronounce it instead of clicking. So we can say it's a computer actually, and it's connected with Wi-Fi. So you can Skype some people and see actually them as long as you walk, for example. So it's a computer, and once it connected to the internet, once, for example, if I'm the developer who developed the system and I have another version, newer version, all I have to do is just accept the new version, and it will be installed directly, and then you can get the next version. So it's like a smartphone.
So it's more than Tutankhamun or just the guide to the museum. It has more to it than that.
Yeah, he can see some kind of actual scenes. He can. I have one of the scenes that can show a battle, the king on his chariot and the minister and lots of horses and people fighting, and you are actually at the middle of this fight, at the middle of this battle, and you can see and listen to these kind of epic soundtracks, and you can feel that you are at the middle of the battle. So this is a new shape of the museum experience.
Now I'm quite curious about the animation itself. How is it done, the one like of the battle or that of Tutankhamun and the palace of the king and all that? So is it all done on the computer outside before you install it on the device? And is it a multi-layered system where you have, for instance, the graphics, and then you have, or is it done like a video player? How is it done?
Basically, you design the 3D character based on some references of the Egyptian references, like inscriptions or some photos and that stuff. Once you build the character, make sure that the skeleton also working perfectly with the muscles and each part of the body, and then you can get some kind of, you have two ways. You either do it with manual animation, one muscle by one muscle, or you can make the easiest way, which is making getting the motion capture suit. And this motion capture suit is a magnetic sensor, has magnetic sensors, is connected with each part of the body and reflects live streaming with the character you have. So once I animate, I can throw this animation on the character on the computer. So I was the actor actually. So I made all of the stories with my body gestures, and then once I finish it, I take it directly to the character, and the character acts exactly like me. So this makes everything easier than before.
This is so cool. So you acted it first. So how did you prepare yourself?
I saw some movies. Yeah, I have to see some movies like Gods of Egypt and some kind of stuff. And also I observed some of tour guides, because the way they explaining stuff, I have to take it, because this is what may make people engage with the context. And also once I finish that, I have to switch it to the facial expressions. So I build a kind of 19 muscle on the face and the way that he looks, and then I put the camera on my face and develop a kind of a small system that can take the facial expressions and apply it directly at the same time with the body animation. So the both animation working together in order to produce one storytelling.
Well, this is a very sensitive technology. It's really sensitive. So what's next for you?
The next, I'm trying to promote the system, because like the article I just wrote, they name it that a new technology revolutionize all of the museum experiences. I'm trying to let the world say this kind of application. Maybe it has a kind of extent. Some people might have a new potential of this idea, can extend it or try to apply in a different cultures or different contexts in different museums. I have like two conferences, one of them in British Museum in London, and the other one in a conference in London as well. And I have some conferences, one in Italy and another in Manchester. I'm trying to spread the word about Museum Eye. Maybe the new phase might witness something new.
Now I understand that among the 171 participants who tried it was the great-grandson of Lord Carnarvon, the one who financed the discovery of the tomb of Tutankhamun. Did you meet him, and what was his feedback about it?
Yeah, we actually, at the middle of our process, I spent like 7-8 days working on that, 50 hours working non-stop. So the problem is, I was in the museum engaging with one of the participants, and then they said that there is one of the biggest guests in the museum. And then he arrives actually, and he was surprised when he saw this kind of application. He tried it, and he was so happy because he saw that his grandfather, who funded this kind of expedition, and the comment he's saying that I'm so happy to see this because it's so much easy. I getting use of it in 5 minutes, which represent the skills of usability that has this kind of device, which for me is a kind of it's an honorable word because this guy comes from the same context and he has some background and he can see his discoveries of his grandfather represented in front of his and it was one of the most important quotes I put it in my PhD.
Well, I wish you all the best of luck, and we hope to see your prototype soon in Oldham Museum. Thank you very much, Mr. Ramy Hammady. Thank you very much, the inventors of Museum Eye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, and that brings us to the end of this episode of Cairo Local Time, but make sure to follow us on our various platforms. We are on Facebook, where it's Cairo Local Time, on Nile TV. Also, we are on Twitter, where it's Cairo Local Time 4 on Twitter. Our email is cairolocaltime4@gmail.com, and of course, you'll find us on Nile TV's network, www.nileinternational.net. Thank you very much, and have a good day.